The rain hadn't stopped for 3 days when Sarah Chun walked into the Desert Rose Saloon for the last time. She was a regular there, not for the drinks, but for the piano in the corner that nobody else seemed to care about. Every Tuesday and Friday night, she'd play old standards while the sparse crowd nursed their beers and pretended not to listen. But they always listened. Sarah had that kind of talent, the kind that made you stop mid-sentence and just absorb the music washing over you. The Desert Rose wasn't much to look at. It sat on the edge of Copper Valley, a dying mining town in Nevada that most maps had forgotten to update. The saloon had been there since the 1800s, one of those places that survived purely on stubbornness and the fact that there was nowhere else to go for 50 miles in any direction. Marcus Webb owned it, had owned it for nearly 30 years after buying it from the previous owner's estate. Marcus was a quiet man, the kind who kept his head down and his business to himself. He poured drinks, kept the peace, and asked no questions. That was his reputation, anyway. On that particular Friday in October, Sarah arrived around 7 in the evening, shaking the rain from her jacket as she pushed through the heavy wooden door. The usual faces were there. Tommy Briggs at the bar, always at the bar, working his way through his disability check one shot at a time. The Henderson brothers in the corner booth, playing cards like they did every night. Claire Morrison waiting tables, moving between the scattered customers with practiced efficiency. And Marcus behind the bar, wiping down glasses that were already clean, because that's what Marcus did when he was thinking too hard about something. Sarah didn't notice anything wrong at first. She hung up her jacket, sat down at the piano, and started warming up her fingers with some scales. The conversation in the room died down the way it always did when she played. She transitioned into Autumn Leaves, letting the melancholy melody fill the space between the creaking floorboards and the tin ceiling. Marcus kept glancing at the door. Claire noticed at first the way his jaw was set tight, the way his hands moved a little too precisely, like he was trying to maintain control over something that wanted to slip away. She'd worked at the Desert Rose for 5 years and had learned to read Marcus's moods. This wasn't his usual quiet contemplation. This was anxiety. Around 8:30, the door opened and a man walked in that nobody recognized. He was tall, maybe 6'2", wearing an expensive leather jacket that looked completely out of place in the Desert Rose. His boots were clean, which immediately marked him as an outsider. Nobody in Copper Valley had clean boots in October. He stood in the doorway for a moment, water dripping from his shoulders, scanning the room with cold blue eyes that seemed to inventory every face, every corner, every exit. Sarah's fingers stumbled on the keys, just for a second, before she recovered and continued playing. But something had shifted in the room. You could feel it, the way you can feel a change in air pressure before a storm. The man walked directly to the bar and sat down 3 stools away from Tommy, who was already too drunk to notice or care. Marcus approached slowly, setting down a napkin with deliberate care. "What can I get you?" Marcus's voice was steady, but Claire heard the tightness in it. "Whiskey." "Neat." The man's voice was rough, like gravel under tires. "And information." Marcus poured the drink without responding, set it down, and waited. "I'm looking for someone," the man continued, pulling out his phone and showing Marcus a photograph. From where Claire stood, she couldn't see the image, but she saw Marcus's face go pale. "Don't know him," Marcus said quickly. Too quickly. The man smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "Funny. I was told he spent a lot of time here. Goes by the name Michael Reeves. Though that might not be the name you know him by." Sarah stopped playing. The silence that followed was absolute. Even the Henderson brothers had paused their card game, sensing something wrong in the air. "I said I don't know him," Marcus repeated, his hand moving subtly towards something under the bar. The man in the leather jacket noticed. "I wouldn't," he said softly. "I'm not here for trouble. I'm here for answers." Michael Reeves worked for a very wealthy man who wants to have a conversation with him about some missing property. Property worth about $2 million. Claire felt her stomach drop. She'd worked in bars long enough to know when something bad was about to happen, and this had all the markers. She caught Sarah's eye and made a subtle gesture toward the door. Sarah, thank God, understood. She stood up slowly from the piano bench, trying not to draw attention. "Nobody here by that name," Marcus said. "Now finish your drink and move on." The man didn't touch his whiskey. Instead, He stood up, his hand sliding inside his jacket. See, here's the thing. I know Michael Reeves came to this town 6 years ago. I know he changed his name. I know he's been hiding, thinking he was clever enough to disappear. And I know that someone in this room knows exactly where he is. That's when Tommy Briggs, drunk and belligerent, slurred from his stool. Why don't you get the hell out of here before someone makes you? The man turned to look at Tommy, really look at him, and something flickered across his face. Recognition, maybe, or realization. He took a step toward Tommy, and Marcus moved fast, pulling a shotgun from under the bar. Out. Now. The man in the leather jacket raised his hands slowly, that same cold smile on his face. Easy. I'm leaving, but I'll be back. And next time, I won't be asking nicely. He backed toward the door, never taking his eyes off Marcus. And then he was gone, disappearing into the rain. The room stayed frozen for a long moment after the door closed. Then everyone started talking at once. Sarah grabbed her jacket and bolted for the exit. Claire rushed to lock the door behind her. The Henderson brothers gathered their cards and headed for the back way out. Within 5 minutes, the Desert Rose was empty except for Marcus, Claire, and Tommy, who had passed out with his head on the bar. Who was that? Claire demanded. And who the hell is Michael Reeves? Marcus set the shotgun down with shaking hands. His face had gone from pale to gray. He looked like he might be sick. Lock the back door too, he said quietly. Then we need to talk. Claire did as she was told, her heart hammering. When she came back to the bar, Marcus had poured himself a drink, something she'd never seen him do in 5 years. 10 years ago, he began, a man came to town calling himself David Martinez. He had money, enough to buy the old Peterson ranch on the outskirts. Kept to himself mostly, but he'd come in here sometimes, have a drink, chat with the regulars. Nice enough guy. Quiet. He told people he'd made his money in real estate and was retiring early to get away from the city. Claire sat down, her legs suddenly weak. And that was Michael Reeves? Marcus nodded slowly. Must have been. I never knew his real name. About 6 years ago, he started coming in more regularly. We became friends, as much as David let anyone become friends with him. He was careful, you know? Never talked about his past, always changed the subject if it came up. But he was generous, tipped well, helped out when folks in town needed it. Fixed Claire Henderson's roof after that storm. Paid for old Mrs. Patterson's medication when she couldn't afford it. People liked him. What happened to him? Claire asked, though part of her already knew the answer. Marcus took a long drink, his hand trembling slightly. 6 years ago, summer, a Friday night like tonight, 2 men came into the bar. They looked like trouble, dressed too nice, asking too many questions. They wanted to know about David Martinez. I told them what I told everyone, that he was a retired real estate investor, kept to himself, didn't bother nobody. They didn't believe me. They stayed for a while, watching, waiting. David came in that night, same as always. I tried to warn him with a look, but he didn't see it in time. Marcus paused, staring into his glass. Claire waited, afraid to breathe. They cornered him in the parking lot. I heard the shots from inside. By the time I got out there, they were gone and David was lying in the rain, bleeding out. He grabbed my arm, pulled me close. He told me his real name was Michael Reeves. He told me he'd stolen money from some dangerous people. Thought he could disappear, start over. He was dying, Claire. He knew it. And you know what his last words were? He said, "Don't tell anyone. Let me stay David Martinez. Let me die as someone good." Claire felt tears prickling her eyes. What did you do? I panicked. I called Sheriff Morrison, that's Claire's dad, and I told him David had been shot in a mugging gone wrong. The sheriff looked at the body, looked at me, and I think he knew I was lying. But David didn't have any ID on him. The killers had taken everything. So the sheriff let it slide. We buried David Martinez in the town cemetery with a funeral paid for by contributions from everyone he'd helped. 37 people showed up to mourn a man they thought they knew. But you kept his secret, Claire said softly. I kept his secret. I told myself it was what he wanted, that he'd earned the right to be remembered as David, not Michael. But really, I was just scared. Scared of those men coming back. Scared of what would happen if the truth came out. So I buried it, just like we buried him. Tommy groaned from the bar. stirring slightly, but not waking. And now they're back, Claire said. Marcus nodded grimly. That man tonight, he's looking for Michael Reeves. Which means someone, somewhere, figured out that David Martinez was Michael. Maybe they tracked financial records. Maybe someone talked. I don't know. But they know he was here, and they want their money. Do you know where the money is? No. David never told me. If he hid it well. Claire stood up, pacing now. So what do we do? That man is going to come back. He's going to ask more questions. He's going to figure out that David Martinez was Michael Reeves. And he's going to want to know what happened to him. I know. Marcus's voice was hollow. And when he does, there are going to be consequences. For me, for the sheriff, for anyone who helped cover this up. They sat in silence for a while, the rain drumming on the roof, Tommy snoring softly at the bar. Finally, Claire spoke. We have to tell the truth. We have to go to the sheriff, tell him everything, and let the authorities handle it. Marcus laughed bitterly. The authorities? Claire, we covered up a murder and lied to the police. Sheriff Morrison is retired now, but he could still face charges for not investigating properly. I could be charged as an accessory. And for what? David's been dead for 6 years. The killers got away. The money's gone. What good does the truth do now? The truth is the truth, Claire said firmly. It doesn't have expiration dates. And that man tonight, he's not going to stop. If we don't tell the authorities, he's going to tear this town apart looking for answers. Before Marcus could respond, there was a loud bang on the door. Both of them jumped. Claire's hand went to her phone, ready to call 911. Marcus grabbed the shotgun again. It's me. Sarah, let me in. Claire rushed to unlock the door. Sarah burst in, soaking wet, her eyes wild. I went to my car and saw him, she gasped. The man from earlier. He's sitting in a black SUV across the street, just watching the saloon. I had to run around back and come through the alley. Marcus cursed under his breath. He's making sure we don't leave. He's planning something. We need to call the police, Sarah said, pulling out her phone. Wait. Marcus held up a hand. Let me think. Think about what? Sarah's voice was rising with panic. That man is dangerous. He probably has a gun. We need help. And what do we tell them? Marcus shot back. That a stranger came into my bar asking questions? They'll take a report and leave. By the time they figure out he's actually dangerous, it'll be too late. Claire's mind was racing. There had to be a way out of this that didn't end with someone else getting hurt. Then it hit her. The ranch, she said suddenly. David's ranch. If the money is anywhere, it's there. What if we gave them that? Told them to search it, that everything David owned is still there. The property's been abandoned for years. Marcus shook his head. The new owners tore down the old house 3 years ago. Built a new one. If the money was there, it's long gone. Then where? Sarah asked desperately. Tommy groaned again and lifted his head from the bar, blinking blearily. What's going on? Nothing, Tommy. Go back to sleep, Marcus said. But Tommy was looking around with the confused clarity that sometimes comes to drunks in the middle of their stupor. Why is everyone so worked up? Is this about David again? The three of them froze. What do you mean again? Claire asked slowly. Tommy rubbed his face. You know, David Martinez, the guy who died. I saw them kill him. Was right here, having a smoke out back. Saw the whole thing. Marcus went very still. Tommy, what exactly did you see? 2 guys beating on David in the parking lot. They shot him. I was scared, so I hid. Didn't tell nobody 'cause I didn't want them coming after me. Tommy's eyes were starting to clear, like the memory was sobering him up. I heard what they said, though. They kept asking David where the money was. He wouldn't tell them. That's why they shot him. Did they search him? Marcus asked urgently. Yeah. Took his wallet, his phone, everything. Then they just left him there to die. Cold-blooded. Tommy shuddered. I wanted to help, but I was too scared. By the time I got up the courage to come out, you were already there, Marcus. Claire felt sick. All these years, Tommy had known the truth and said nothing. Just like Marcus. Just like the sheriff. How many people in this town had been carrying pieces of this secret? Sarah moved to the window, peeking carefully through the blinds. The SUV's still there. Marcus made a decision. He pulled out his phone and dialed. Sheriff? It's Marcus Webb from the Desert Rose. I need you to come down here. We got a situation. He paused, listening. I know you're retired, but this is connected to something from 6 years ago. David Martinez. It's time we talked about what really happened. 20 minutes later, former Sheriff Dan Morrison arrived, now in his early 70s, but still carrying himself with the authority of his old position. He looked at the group gathered in the bar, then at the black SUV visible through the window, and his weathered face hardened. "Tell me everything," he said. Marcus did. He told him about the man who'd come in asking questions. He told him about Michael Reeves and the $2 million. He told him about his suspicions from 6 years ago, the things he'd never said out loud. Tommy corroborated, adding details about the murder that even Marcus hadn't known. When they finished, Sheriff Morrison was quiet for a long time. Finally, he spoke, his voice heavy. "I knew something was wrong that night. David Martinez had no ID, no phone, no wallet. But he did have a gunshot wound consistent with an execution, and the way his body was positioned, it was clear he'd been dragged. I should have investigated further. But Marcus, you seemed so sure it was a mugging, and I trusted you. Plus, this town had already been through so much with the mine closing. I didn't want to bring more trouble down on us. So I let it go. I've regretted it every day since." "So what do we do now?" Claire asked. "That man out there isn't going to just leave." Sheriff Morrison looked at the black SUV, his jaw set. "We do what we should have done 6 years ago. We tell the truth. All of it. But first, I'm calling the current sheriff and the state police. If that man out there is who I think he is, he's not just looking for money. He's here to clean up loose ends. Anyone connected to Michael Reeves is in danger." He made the calls, speaking in low, urgent tones. Within 15 minutes, police cars started arriving, lights off, surrounding the desert rows from multiple directions. The black SUV didn't move at first. Then suddenly the engine roared to life and it peeled out, racing down the empty street. 3 patrol cars gave chase. The current sheriff, a no-nonsense woman named Kate Brennan, came into the saloon and listened to the whole story again. Her face grew darker with each revelation. When they finished, she sat back and looked at each of them in turn. "You realize you've all admitted to obstruction of justice. At minimum," she said flatly. "Sheriff Morrison, you failed in your duty to properly investigate a homicide. Marcus, you lied to police and concealed evidence. Tommy, you witnessed a murder and said nothing. The only ones here who aren't implicated are Claire and Sarah, and even that's questionable since you now have knowledge of these crimes. What about the money?" Sarah asked quietly. "The $2 million. Where is it?" Sheriff Brennan shook her head. "That's the question, isn't it? My guess. Michael Reeves, David Martinez, whatever he called himself, he spent it. $2 million over 10 years, living quietly in a small town, helping people out, buying property. That money would disappear pretty quickly. Or maybe he hid it somewhere and died before he could retrieve it. Either way, the people he stole it from aren't going to believe that. They're going to keep looking." A radio crackled. One of the patrol officers reported that they'd lost the black SUV on the highway heading south. It had turned off its lights and disappeared into the desert. Sheriff Brennan cursed under her breath. "We're going to need all of you to come to the station and give formal statements," she said. "This is now an active investigation into both the murder of Michael Reeves and the cover-up that followed. I won't lie to you, there will be consequences. But cooperating fully is your best option at this point." They all agreed, of course. What choice do they have? Over the next several hours, they each gave detailed statements at the sheriff's station. The story that emerged was a tragic one. A man who'd made a terrible mistake, tried to outrun his past, and paid for it with his life. In a town that had loved him enough to protect his memory, even at the cost of justice. The investigation that followed was extensive. State police and federal agents descended on Copper Valley, interviewing everyone who'd known David Martinez. They exhumed his body to confirm his identity through DNA. They searched the old Peterson Ranch, now owned by a young family who were horrified to learn their property's history. They found nothing. No money, no evidence of where Michael Reeves had hidden his stolen fortune. But they did find something else. In the weeks following that rainy night at the Desert Rose, as investigators dug deeper into Michael Reeves's past, a different picture began to emerge. Yes, he'd embezzled $2 million from his employer, a wealthy real estate developer named Richard Castellano. But Reeves had only taken that money after discovering that Castellano was using his real estate company as a front for money laundering and human trafficking. Reeves had tried to go to the authorities, but Castellano had connections, powerful ones. The evidence Reeves had gathered disappeared. Cases were dropped, and Reeves realized that the only way to hurt Castellano was to take something he valued, his money. So Reeves had stolen the $2 million, not to enrich himself, but to bankrupt Castellano's operation. And then he'd run, knowing that Castellano would never stop looking for him. The money wasn't hidden away in some secret location. Reeves had spent it systematically over the years, donating to charities that fought human trafficking, funding safe houses for victims, paying for legal aid for people caught up in Castellano's web. He'd laundered the stolen money back into doing good, trying in his own way to atone for the years he'd unknowingly worked for a monster. This revelation changed everything. The federal investigation shifted focus from the $2 million to Richard Castellano. Using financial records that Reeves had hidden in a safety deposit box, discovered only after a thorough investigation of his activities in Copper Valley, the FBI built a case against Castellano and his organization. 18 months after that rainy night at the Desert Rose, Castellano was arrested along with 15 members of his operation. They faced charges ranging from money laundering to human trafficking to murder. The man in the leather jacket was identified as Vincent Moretti, one of Castellano's enforcers and the primary suspect in Michael Reeves's murder. He was arrested trying to cross the border into Mexico. In exchange for a reduced sentence, he confirmed what investigators had suspected. He and his partner had tracked Reeves to Copper Valley 6 years ago, killed him when he refused to give up the money's location, and fled when they realized the murder had been witnessed. They'd reported back to Castellano that Reeves was dead, but that the money's location had died with him. As for the people of Copper Valley, they faced their own reckoning. Sheriff Morrison was charged with dereliction of duty, but received a suspended sentence given his age and otherwise exemplary record. Marcus Webb was charged with obstruction of justice and received 2 years probation. Tommy Briggs was offered immunity in exchange for his testimony. Claire and Sarah, who had no knowledge of the original crime, faced no charges. The town itself struggled with the revelations. Some people felt betrayed that Marcus and the sheriff had lied. Others understood why they'd done it, especially after learning the truth about Michael Reeves and what he'd been trying to do. The Desert Rose Saloon became something of a landmark, the place where the truth had finally emerged after 6 years of silence. Sarah Chin never played piano at the Desert Rose again. The weight of that night, of seeing how close she'd come to becoming another casualty of violence, was too much. She moved to Reno, found work as a music teacher, and tried to forget. But sometimes when she played Autumn Leaves, she thought of David Martinez and the secrets people carry. Claire Morrison stayed in Copper Valley, eventually buying the Desert Rose from Marcus, who retired shortly after his conviction. She renamed it the Second Chance Saloon and turned it into a community center, a place where people could come together honestly, without the weight of hidden truths. On the wall, she hung a plaque dedicated to David Martinez, acknowledging both his crimes and his redemption, his mistakes and his sacrifice. Tommy Briggs got sober. The trauma of finally telling the truth about what he'd witnessed that night shocked him into confronting his demons. He joined AA, got a job at the hardware store, and became a sponsor for other people struggling with addiction. He never forgot the night he'd been too scared to help a dying man, and he spent the rest of his life trying to make up for it. Marcus Webb lived out his retirement in quiet reflection. He wrote a memoir about his years running the Desert Rose, including the full story of David Martinez and Michael Reeves. He donated all the proceeds to organizations fighting human trafficking, the same cause that Reeves had supported. In his final chapter, he wrote, "We all make choices in moments of fear and uncertainty. I chose to keep a secret because I thought it would protect people. But secrets are like debts. They accumulate interest over time, and eventually the cost becomes unbearable. The truth is expensive, but lies cost even more." The story of the Desert Rose murder, as it came to be known, resonated far beyond Copper Valley. It became a case study in ethics classes about the nature of truth and justice. Was Marcus wrong to lie, even if his lie protected the memory of a good man? Was the sheriff wrong to let his investigation slide, even if a more thorough investigation would have exposed Reeves's whereabouts to the people hunting him? Was Reeves himself a villain or a hero, a thief who became a benefactor, or a whistleblower who used illegal means to fight an even greater evil? There were no easy answers, which is perhaps the most important lesson of all. The truth, when it finally emerged, didn't provide closure so much as complexity. It revealed that people are not simply good or bad, that choices made in desperation can have consequences that ripple out for years, and that sometimes the line between justice and mercy is blurrier than we'd like to admit. Years later, on the anniversary of Michael Reeves's death, the people of Copper Valley hold a small ceremony at his grave. They lay flowers and share stories about the man they knew as David Martinez. They don't shy away from his complicated legacy. Instead, they embrace it, acknowledging that he was a flawed person who tried to do better, who made terrible mistakes, and spent the last years of his life trying to atone for them. And in the Second Chance Saloon, on Friday nights, musicians still play. Not Sarah Chun. She never returned, but others who learned about the story and wanted to honor the memory of the man who'd once died in the parking lot outside. They play Autumn Leaves and other standards, filling the space with music that speaks to the complicated beauty of human nature, the way we fail and rise, hurt and heal, lie and eventually, sometimes, find the courage to tell the truth. The Desert Rose murder was covered up for 6 years, but when the truth finally emerged, it didn't destroy Copper Valley. Instead, it transformed it into a place that understood, perhaps better than most, that redemption is possible, that secrets always come to light, and that sometimes the hardest thing we can do is be honest about the complicated, messy, beautiful truth of who we are and what we've done. The story ends not with vindication or punishment, but with understanding. Understanding that Michael Reeves was both a criminal and a hero. Understanding that Marcus Webb was both a liar and a loyal friend. Understanding that the truth, when it finally comes, doesn't erase the past, but gives us a chance to learn from it, to do better, to be better. And maybe that's the real story, not the murder or the cover-up, but what came after. The hard work of facing consequences, making amends, and building something new from the rubble of lies and half-truths. Because in the end, the truth didn't destroy Copper Valley. It saved it, one difficult conversation, one brave admission, one moment of honesty at a time. The Desert Rose Saloon may be gone, but the Second Chance Saloon stands in its place, a testament to the power of truth and the possibility of redemption. And every Friday night, when the music plays, it reminds everyone who hears it that we all carry secrets, we all make mistakes, and we all deserve the chance to make things right.